What's up, everybody? I'm back again with another tier list because the one that I did last week on Genesis was A, lot of fun, and B, really easy to make. So I'm back again with another one of my favorite bands of all time, Rush. And with the untimely passing of Neil Peart, this seems more appropriate now than ever. Now, before I get into this tier list, this ranking list of all of Rush's albums, which they have 2 million of, by the way, I am going to start off by saying I am a fan of Rush's 80s synth cheese period, okay? So just keep that in mind, because I'm probably going to say some things that will offend some of the more classic Rush heads out there. So let's get started. This is one of those S through F tiers here. S meaning satisfactory, I'm guessing, and then you have A, B, C, D, and F. So we're going to start off with their first album, and this is my opinion, okay? All of this is my opinion. You can agree with it if you want, but you don't have to. No one's holding a gun to your head here. I'm putting that at an F, because when Rush first came out, to me, from listening to this album, they sounded like a Led Zeppelin knockoff. Vocally, Geddy Lee sounded like a poor man's Led Zeppelin. The riffs weren't as good as Led Zeppelin, and John Rutsey was no John Bonham or Neil Peart. So this album suffers from a lot of issues. Just for one, it just sounds dated as all hell if you go back and listen to the album now. We have songs like Finding My Way. Well, no, what am I doing? That is... Oh, wait, no. Yeah, that's off the first album. Finding My Way is actually a pretty good song. I forgot Finding My Way was on this album, but nevertheless, they have such dated tracks as Need Some Love and Take a Friend and Here Again, which is their attempt at some stoner ballad. And then, of course, Working Man, which is a song that put them on the map. It's crazy when these albums have almost one good song in it, and that's pretty much it. And that I would argue would be the case for this album, barring Finding My Way. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson wrote all the lyrics back then, and you can tell by awful songs like In the Mood and Need Some Love. Just a bunch of 1970s cock rock cliches that I do not find endearing at all. So their first album is one of their worst. Then we get into Fly By Night, their second album, when Neil Peart actually joins the band. I will give this a solid C. Now, I will say that unlike the first album, they're taking some more chances here. The song anthems are really strong. Intro, then you have songs like By-Tor and the Snow Dog, which you really start to see Rush's prog roots start to show. They have these different time signatures and, these long, tracks with all these various movements. They had the radio staple Fly By Night. And then you had some other songs that were more forgettable, like Rivendell and In the End and Making Memories. Beneath, Between, Behind is kind of a fun song. So, but, again, that whole classic rock sound of that permeated that time period reminds me a lot of what this album sounds like. So it's not going to be very high up on the list for me personally. Ooh, up next we got Caress of Steel. That's going to be a D. I think it's a little better than their first album, but only in the sense that it was more adventurous and more risks were taken. You could see growth in the band at this point. They had the whole huge Fountain of Lamneth, which was a whole side 2 of this album, or the B-side of this album, that had all these various movements, and it was almost a prelude to 2112 in the sense that there were all these different kind of movements of the song, which you saw in By-Tor as well. Then you had Bastille Day, which is almost like a punk rock song before punk rock was even really popular. Lakeside Park, believe it or not, I don't know what it is, but the beat to that song, I always found myself playing that on the drums. A doon, da-doon, doon, da-doon, ga, da-doon, da-doon, in the drum fill. So as much of a rarity or deep cut as Lakeside Park is, I actually like that song a lot. The Necromancer is a cool song. They have one particular movement on here. I think it's called something, No One at the Bridge. That's actually a really cool guitar riff. It's very dark. But then you have with every Rush album, there's always at least one song on there that sucks. I mean, I think every Rush fan will admit that. And on this album, it's definitely, I Think I'm Going Bald. What a sticking out like a sore thumb track. The song's literally about how Geddy was afraid that he was going bald at some point in his life because he was so stressed out, I guess. And, what a goofy-ass song. I mean, there are goofy they're a goofy bunch of guys and all, but it usually doesn't make its way into their music. They're usually very serious about their music, but it made it onto that album, and I mean, yeah, whatever. It's a prelude album. Up next, we got the big one, 2112, and I'm gonna put it in the B tier. And the only reason I'm putting it in the B tier is honestly for the B-sides of this album. I think the B-sides of 2112 are a lot more interesting to me than the 2112 Overture on side A. It just doesn't do anything to me, for me, and it never has. I've never understood what the hype about the 2112 Overture was. I feel like you really had to have grown up in the 70s when this album first came out to truly appreciate that song. But by the time I started listening to music, there was so much more complex or interesting music out there that 2112 just did. I tried so hard to get into this song, and anytime it's played live and people freak out, I'm just like, oh, I gotta sit through this again. It's just like, it's that 70s classic rock kind of cock rock shit that I just don't really care that much about. And then, that's got the, listen to my music and hear what it can do, that whole thing. And I just don't really care for it. But side B, you have Passage to Bangkok, which is a really badass song that has this cool guitar harmony in it. The Twilight Zone is a really cool song. Lessons is decent. Tears is, not only is Tears like a really good, like kind of more emotional singer-songwriter-y song, but Alice in Chains recently did a cover of Rush's Tears, and it is fucking phenomenal. I highly suggest listening to it. It's on Spotify if you have it. And then the final track on this album, Something for Nothing, really great song. The side B of 2112 is more digestible, better songs, shorter, more to the point. Bigger fan of side B of 2112. Up next, we have A Farewell to Kings, and like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the 70s period of Rush, so I'm probably going to set this, I'll set this in the B tier, I guess. On Farewell to Kings, we have the title track, which I think is an underrated Rush song. I think it's one of the better songs on the album. Xanadu, another one of those long Rush songs that has just never done it for me like it does for other people. Like, people freak out about that song. And it's just like this long, drawn-out kind of prog rock, kind of, a lesson in, like, beginner prog rock. Genesis was doing way more complex prog music at this time. And when I heard Xanadu, it just sounds like, some parts of it just sound like you're literally like, a guitar player that's going through your scales and practicing running up and down your scales. It's like, it's not that great. It's like any musician that's learning their scales, going up and down their scales, that's Xanadu, pretty much. And there's some okay parts in there, but, you're not going to hear me say a lot of positive, like uber positive stuff about the 70s period of Rush, because that's just not the time period that I like. Closer to the Heart, I've never really liked that song. It's short, so thankfully it doesn't drag out like some of their more, meandering prog efforts. Cinderella Man, whatever. Don't really care about that song one way or the other. Madrigal, I don't even remember how that song goes, honestly. But that's one of the shortest Rush songs in their entire catalog, coming in at only 2 minutes and 35 seconds. Cygnus X is the best song on this album, probably. It's a more proggier jam, and it's got some really cool bass riffs. And then the guitar is doing some cool stuff in there. Anyway, I would play you these clips, but with how YouTube works nowadays, you get struck down so fast if you even think about doing anything like that. So no point. This is going to be such a long video, I can already tell. I'm only on Hemispheres. Moving on to Hemispheres. I will put this in the... You know what? I'm going to put Farewell to Kings. I changed my mind. That's going in the C tier with Fly By Night. Hemispheres is going in the B tier with 2112. I like Hemispheres a little bit more than I like Farewell to Kings. Cygnus X, Book 2, which is the kind of the sequel to the long proggy jam off of Farewell to Kings, is how we begin this album. And it's okay, but Circumstances is one of my favorite 70s period songs from Rush. The all the same, we take our chances, count about time. That is such a good song. So for that reason alone, it makes it in here. La Villa Strangiato, it says in parentheses, an exercise in self-indulgence. Pretty much. It's the band showing off their musical proficiency at this point in their career. They've become kind of kings at their instruments, and they know it, and they want to show it off. This track blew a lot of early Rush fans' minds. I get it. Again, it's 70s period Rush, so you're not going to get a lot of, oh my god, it's epic. But, you know, my inner Bill Cosby will apparently like something later on in this tier list, so that's where Hemispheres goes. Up next, we have Permanent Waves. That easily goes into the A tier for me. Permanent Waves is a clear delineation in the sand for Rush from their prog past into their more pop-centric short song future. And this album is the beginning of the short pop experimentations while still having that prog sensibility. We see that with songs like Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, not so much. It's kind of a long song, but, you know, you get the point. Spirit of Radio and Free Will are some of Rush's biggest radio staples that are still played on the radio to this day. The proggy songs on here and the long songs are more interesting in my opinion. Jacob's Ladder, we start seeing more synthesizer influence, really psychedelic sounding synth parts. Natural Science is cool with the kind of the production of the echoes of the waves slapping against the rocks at the beginning of the song, and the, you know, hyperspace movement. It's just like a tasty groove and guitar riff. This is the beginning of what will eventually kind of manifest into Rush's most popular album this day, which has to go into the S tier, which is, of course, Moving Pictures. What can I say about this album that a million people haven't already said? Tom Sawyer is the first song I ever really heard by Rush that ever really got me into them. When I heard that random synthesizer riff come in the middle of the song, I was hooked. I just thought that was so cool. It was one of the first albums by Rush that I bought. I thought it was amazing beginning to end. Red Barchetta is a fun song. YYZ is just epic instrumental, completely stands the test of time, timeless. The thick pads in the bridge of YYZ where Lifeson's doing his guitar solo, and then back to that very bizarre. If you've ever tried to play that song on an instrument, good luck. It's very difficult. Limelight, I was obsessed with that song for a while. I was obsessed with the guitar solo for Limelight. That is one of the tastiest, most well-composed guitar solos as far as use of dive bombs and techniques like that. Alex hits this note at the end of his guitar solo in Limelight where he sustains this really high note, and he's using his whammy bar up and down really fast to make this fluttering effect. And I swear, it sounds like that note is sustained through the rest of the entire song, and I was always obsessed as a kid with how did he hold that note out for the whole rest of that song. If you listen to the background, I swear it's there. To me, on this album, The Camera Eye is one of the weaker tracks for me personally. I just thought there was a lot of build up to a climax that wasn't very interesting. The I just didn't think it was that interesting of a riff. The verses didn't really do much for me melodically or musically. It just, I don't know, and it's a long song too, so to have a song that I'm not that crazy about that lasts that long is kind of a bummer. Witch Hunt is such an amazing song. Love that song. This is when they start introducing the Fear series of songs. This is part 3 of Fear. Did we ever find out what part 1 and 2 of Fear was? Am I looking over that or something? We'll figure out when we go through the rest of the albums, I guess. And then, of course, you have Vital Signs, which is the last song of the album. Amazing new wave / kind of Police influence, definitely on that song, hardcore. Very cool sequenced bass line, and then Geddy comes in and it matches it on his bass. Just very tasty stuff in that song. The lyrics are very interesting by Neil. Everything's starting to get more modern lyrically. They're no longer talking about dragons and all kinds of mythical wizards and shit. Now they're talking more about like modern issues, and they just feel more modern in every way. Then with our next album, Signals, which was the first Rush album I ever bought and still my favorite, absolutely S-tier album, favorite album of all time. They've completely moved into the digital age with this album, much to the chagrin of many of the classic rock era Rush fans, but I don't give a fuck. I love this album. Subdivisions is one of my favorite songs, not only from Rush, but of all time. All the synth work done on that song is just so intoxicating to my brain. I just love synthesizers. I love the work that he did on that song. Geddy is toning his voice down now, finally. He started doing that in Moving Pictures on some songs, but on this album, he's definitely just toned that high chipmunk style that we're used to. He's toned it down. It sounds great. I don't know why towards the end of Rush's career they didn't do more songs where he tried to sing low. It's almost like he was trying to bring back that old classic 70s Geddy in the older albums, but we'll get to that later on. But I mean, the Analog Kid, dan dan, biddle diddle 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 ding ding, and diddle diddle, just the musicality and the talent is there in spades, but they're finding a way to shoehorn that into this pop digestible formula, which makes for a really interesting musical experience. You can tell Geddy is spending more time on the melodies. And then we move on into track 3, Chemistry, which fantastic song. It's got this weird pre-chorus where it's like this, Alex is playing on the offbeat with his, guitar, like doing this upstroke thing. Geddy's doing this synth line. Neil's doing this really spacey kind of, I don't know what kind of beat you would call it, but a very cool song. Digital Man is probably one of my least favorite songs on this album. It just feels a little... Well, no, Digital Man is the wrong song. New World Man is one of my least favorite songs off this album. I just thought it was kind of a boring song. And then we get to The Weapon, which is part 2 of Fear. Okay, so I see they're going in some backwards weird direction here. The Weapon, it's got this disco kind of sequence synthesizer in the background. It's like and the beat that Neil plays on this, if you can follow this as a drummer, then you are very talented, because his snare hits are so, it almost sounds randomized when he's hitting the snare. He's staying on the kick, but whenever he comes in on the snare, it's just so random, like you can't map it out. Losing It towards the end of this album is a very somber song, and it's about basically artists or people who have talent who lose that ability with age. And it's kind of like the beginning of Neil's realistic lyric writing in a very negative and somber light. This will continue throughout the rest of Rush's career, where Neil's lyrics get a lot more introspective and sometimes depressing, quite frankly. But this is a beautiful song, beautiful electronic violin solo. I forget who they had actually play that solo on the album. Oh, Ben Mink, that's right. And then Countdown. Some people may think that's a cheesy song. It's about when Rush were invited to NASA to see the space launch, and they thought it was really cool, so they wrote a song about it. And, it is a little corny, but there's some really cool synth lines in there, and I don't think it's that bad of a song. So, there you go. All right, moving on to our next album, we have Grace Under Pressure. That's an S-tier album for me, man. I love their 80s period, and this was early enough in their career where I don't feel like they had gone overboard with it yet. Distant Early Warning with those big church organ, and the drums going along with it, badass. After Image, amazing song. Very synth heavy now. Every song has some kind of synth in it at this point. When during Moving Pictures we saw the beginning of that, now it's like a mandatory thing. Every single song has synth in it, and I love it. And I love their use of synth because they're still working in their traditional instruments, but they're adding unique flavors with the synthesizers. Red Sector A, very cool, kind of electronic, electro song, but it's still got Alex's weird, way high up on the guitar, playing these weird chords and fluttering that whammy bar. Man, he fluttered that whammy bar so much in the 80s, and it made the guitar itself almost sound like a synthesizer, which I'm going to guess is the goal. The Enemy Within is one of my favorite songs by Rush as well. It's part one of Fear. So they started at the Witch Hunt, and then they went backwards. But they didn't stop there, because then later on in Vapor Trails, they add another addition to the Fear catalog. So who the hell knows how that even works. Body Electric, great song. Kid Gloves, really like the song. Between the Wheels is a fantastic song. The weak song, the runt of this litter is Red Lenses. It's very goofy 80s, like bad 80s. And I think it's about like tabloids and just the kind of whatever. I don't know. It's just a goofy song. We will see more of these here soon. Up next, we have Power Windows. For me, Power Windows gets an A tier. Still really like it. Still a really good album. But on this album, we start to see some songs that we start to see Rush kind of go really far into the 80s stuff before kind of going into their next phase, which is what I like to call like adult contemporary prog. But they're still right now they're heavily in the 80s stuff, like almost so much into it that it's turning off most hardcore Rush fans at this point. But I love this album. The Big Money, I mean, that bass line on that song is insane, and he's Geddy Lee singing while playing that bass line. Just listen to that song. Grand Designs is a beautiful song, love it. Then you get into Manhattan Project. He's talking about building, the whole building of the bomb that was eventually dropped on Japan. And I don't know. I just don't think it's that strong of a song. And the subject matter is just kind of, I don't know. I'm not that interested in it. Marathon is one of my favorite songs. I love that song. Then we get into this song, Territories. To me, Territories is the weakest song off this album. This is the runt of the litter off Power Windows. The song, as it became this cliche in the 80s, it has this oriental sounding kind of, I don't know what it was about the 80s, but like it seemed like Western artists really got into like Asian culture and incorporating these Asian flares and sounds into their music, and this was an example of that. And then lyrically, the song's about how basically being, territorial or being like imperialistic is stupid, which I agree with, but it's like, is that the most exciting song fodder? I don't think so. Middletown Dreams and Emotion Detector are two of my favorite Rush songs of all time, and those are the next two songs. And then Mystic Rhythms, again, with a great song. So there's really only like two songs on here that I skip, Manhattan Project and Territories. But yeah, it's a really good album. Not quite S tier, but definitely A tier for me. Up next, we get into Hold Your Fire. I'm actually going to put Hold Your Fire in the B tier. It's like Power Windows, but now it's gotten a little bloated. CDs were just becoming a thing at this time, so they were able to fit more onto the CD than they were a record. So this album has a few songs on here that I feel like if this were a record would not be on here. Force 10 is a great opener. That's that electronic drum sound with that kind of like very mechanical that's cool. Time Stand Still, beautiful song. You had Amy, what is her name? Amy Mann from, I honestly forget what band she's from, but she did guest vocals on there, which is the only time I want to say Rush has ever had a backup vocalist on any of their songs. Then you get the song Open Secrets, where, I don't know, you kind of, Open Secrets and Second Nature, Prime Mover, they're kind of B-tier 80s Rush songs. They're still good. I really like them, but they're not, I don't know, man. They were definitely a product of that period for the band. I don't see them ever doing a song like that again. Which I would take these songs any day of the week over anything off of Clockwork Angels, but we'll get to that. Lock and Key is a fantastic song. That song features basically a drum solo by Neil Peart in the actual song in the middle. I mean, he's just going off on the middle section. Sorry, I keep rubbing my face, guys. The pollen this time of year, for whatever reason, in Jacksonville is bad, and it's really bugging me during this video. And I think I'm using a detergent a new detergent that on my clothes that my skin is not happy with. The the very much garbage runt of this album is the song Tai Shan. Oh God, most Rush fans do not like this song. Even Geddy Lee himself goes back on and has said about this song, like, what were we thinking when we released this one? And again, if you were forced to have only 8 songs on this album, Tai Shan would have never made it on here. So that's why more is not always better. That's a good example of this. Moving on to their next album, Presto. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the B tier as well. This is the first album that marks the shift of Rush's next evolution, which is what I like to call their adult contemporary prog, where they've moved out of the 80s synth sounds and now they're doing the more of the I feel like coffee house rock style. I just think of like sepia tones when I think of this album. I think of, bad, 90s music videos with that very artsy lighting and the shadows and all. But there's still some great songs in here. Show Don't Tell is an amazing opener to any album. That riff. That song's amazing. Then you got The Past, which is a really a song that's near and dear to Neil's heart lyrically. That's a cool song. You got some other songs in here that are definitely like, War Paint, like Paint the Mirror Black, Paint It Black. I don't know. It just started getting a little... It was testing the patience of, I think, a lot of Rush fans with this album. They had gotten so far away from any kind of, like, rock, and it was very much, I don't know, adult contemporary is the only way I could put it. Presto is a kind of a pretty song. It's kind of emotional. Superconductor, the song Superconductor, is basically Neil just describing the music industry and how they view artists as these products and commodities to be sold to an audience. And for that alone, this song is great lyrically. And then some of Rush's most underrated songs are towards the end of this album. Red Tide, really driving... like chorus, this is not a false alarm, this is not a test. That's a great song. And then Available Light, the last song on this album, one of their best. Gives me goosebumps when I listen to this song. Like, why have they never played this song live? It's an amazing song. I bet there is a live version of it out there on YouTube. I'm gonna look it up. But it's kind of an underrated album. Up next, we have almost the precursor or the sequel to the adult contemporary Rush, which is Roll the Bones, which I'm going to put in the C tier because it's not quite as good as Presto. Sure, you have songs like Dreamline, which is, they fucking love that song. The guys in Rush, they opened up not only a lot of their shows with that song, but they had that song in a lot of their set lists. So they really believed in that song a lot. And they really like the song Bravado because they played that one a lot at some point. Roll the Bones is a great song. Face Up sucks. I don't like that song. Face up when I can only back down. Face up, too much talking. Whatever. Where's My Thing is a very 90s sounding song, I guess. Like, if you listen to prog rock bands in the 90s that were kind of cheesy, like Dream Theater, you could see a song like this being on their album, although I think Dream Theater was a heavier band in the 90s than Rush were. Well, that is until their next album, but we'll get to that. The Big Wheel sucks. Heresy is actually a good song, I think, if that's the one. No, Ghost of a Chance is the one I really like. Neurotica sucks, and You Bet Your Life sucks. It's a very weak... It starts out kind of strong and has a very weak side to this album. So Roll the Bones, not one of their best by any stretch of the imagination. Then we get into Counterparts, and to me, this is an A-tier album. I love Counterparts. Almost every song on here, to me, is good. They got way back into... I shouldn't say they got back into the heaviness, because they were never really a heavy band, per se. But they, by 1993, when this album came out, they were really embracing that kind of triple rectifier, super crunchy distortion that a lot of bands like Tool and... Rage Against the Machine were making popular, Animate, great song. Neil Peart actually has some balls on his drums now. When he starts in the drums on the first song, that da 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 boo ba do, and there's that room echo, and the drums sound like all hairy and kind of distorted. It's like, hell yeah, Rush is finally in the 20th century with their production. Stick It Out. Now we're seeing them tune their guitars down to drop D for that song. It's a riff that any Black Sabbath song would have been proud of. Cut to the Chase. I really like that song. Nobody's Hero is like this 90s adult contemporary ballad that doesn't suck. Between the Sun and Moon has a fun, very sing-along-y chorus. Not my favorite song, but not a bad song. Alien Shore, it's like, by the time I get to track 6 on this album, I'm just along for the roller coaster ride that I'm being taken on, so I just roll with it. It's not the best song, but it's not the worst either. Speed of Love kind of sucks. Double Agent isn't the best. But then we get to Leave That Thing Alone, which is, at this point, Rush is trying to do an instrumental on every single one of their albums. Leave That Thing Alone, amazing instrumental. Love the bass line, the boo. It's just fantastic song. Alex is doing a great lead over it. It's got the synths, it's got the organs. Cold Fire is a great song about romance and relationships. It's got a very serious grown-up tone. Everyday Glory, fantastic song about rising from the ashes with Everyday Glory. And yeah, then we get into Test for Echo. And this, to me, is when Rush starts to suck. Test for Echo gets the D tier. So the album started out with so much promise. The song Test for Echo is amazing. I love the lyrics. It feels like Neil is finally starting to write about things that are actually happening in the 90s at that time. The lyrics for Test for Echo, is talking about, crime, dramas, and the news's obsession with getting, blood and gore, and the cynical side of Neil is really starting to come out, and this is before all the tragedies that befell him. So he's already turning into the grumpy old man by this album. And then the next song, Driven, is a great song. Another great song, Drop D. I want to say it's in Drop D. I might be wrong on that one, but it's a fantastic song. And then the whole rest of the album just kind of goes to shit. Half the World sucks. Half the world gives, and half the world takes. Half the world cries, while the other half bleh. It sucks. The lyrics suck. The music isn't good. It's like a collective soul B-side. Then The Color of Right, that's a corny song. Time and Motion is okay. I think that's their instrumental, but it's got this really cheesy metallic sounding synthesizer. It sounds like some Disneyland Fantasia knockoff synth line. The Totem, Geddy Lee's talking about his totem pole. Do you really want to hear about Geddy talk about his totem pole? And then Dog Years. It's the only song I know of where Rush actually curses and says the phrase son of a bitch, but he's referring to a dog, so it's okay. Virtuality is a song that has aged awfully. It's about the internet, guys. Rush is finally talking about the internet. It's like, little boy. Oh no, it's what is it? Hold on, I gotta look up the lyrics to this because it's so bad. Net boy, net girl, send your impulse round the world. Put your message in a modem and throw it into the cyber sea. And that is one of many awful cliches of the internet that exist in this song. This, along with that Tai Shan song from Hold Your Fire, is one of, I think, Rush's worst songs. Then they have the song Resist, which is okay. It's an okay folk song at best. Limbo, I don't even remember what that song sounds like, so it can't be that great. Carve Away the Stone is an alright ending to the album. It's kind of I don't know, it's okay. Not a great album, and it doesn't get much better from here, folks. This is a sad time in Rush's career, I think, for any fan. For me, Vapor Trails, I'll put that in the C list. Overall, it's got a little bit better songs. One Little Victory is one of the dopest openers to any album. That drum beat, that badass opening song. Although you can clearly hear that Geddy Lee's starting to lose his high range, if not, has already lost it. Rush has taken a very long hiatus by the time this album comes out. They had been gone for like 6 years, and Geddy's voice has not, preserved all that well. It only gets worse from here, vocally speaking, for his next albums. But moving on. Ceiling Unlimited, it's okay. You definitely know this is a new Rush and you don't know how to feel about it. Ghost Rider's a cool song. These are all growers. You gotta listen. That's the problem with this album. There's no song in particular that sticks out as the single, except maybe One Little Victory. You have to listen to all these songs a good 5 or 6 times before they really start to sink in and you really start to enjoy them. Peaceable Kingdom is about 9/11. It's okay, I guess. The Stars Look Down is kind of a cool song. How It Is, not that great. Vapor Trail's cool. Secret Touch is one of the better songs in this album, followed by Earthshine, which is another good song. Very, very heavy guitars on this album. They were trying to just be the heaviest. And I'm not talking about like the riffs. I'm just talking about the tones are just thick and syrupy. Then you have Freeze, which is part 4 of Fear. So now they're going back to the future, but it sounds nothing like any of their 80s stuff, and I don't even remember how Out of the Cradle sounds, so yeah, there you go. Next we get into Snakes and Arrows, which I'm going to put at the B tier. I think for whatever reason, this album had better songs on it. Far Cry, just the beginning of that album, that it's just really, like, I don't know, it's that poppy progginess that I like. It's prog in little doses that Baby Josh can take. Armor and Sword, very cool song, has a very badass, like, harmony between the guitar and bass in that song. Boom, din, dun, din, din, dun, 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 din. It's kind of like Tool influence sounding. Working Them Angels sucks. I don't like that song. The Larger Bowl is decent. Spindrift is good. Main Monkey Business is okay. The Way the Wind Blows, Hope is okay. Faithless is okay. One thing I will say, Malignant Narcissism is a really good instrumental too. Neil has by far the most negative lyrics on this album that you will ever hear. If you want to talk about Neil being a cynical or a someone who looks at the human condition in a negative way, dude, this album will, if you're on the edge of jumping off a bridge, do not listen to this album. It has some of the most negative lyrics on it. One of the lines, I think it's from the song Good News First, he's like, what was it? There's no special place on the earth, so give me the good news first. I gotta look this up. Okay, so the lyrics, the song I was thinking of was The Larger Bowl. It's like the lyrics, if we're so much the same, like I always hear, why such different fortunes and fates? Some of us live in a cloud of fear, some live behind iron gates. Why such different fortunes and fates? Some are blessed and some are cursed. Some live behind iron gates while others only see the worst. Some are blessed and some are cursed, the golden one or scarred from birth, while others only see the worst. Such a lot of pain on the earth. This is just a small little sample. I don't want this video to be 2 hours long, but you can go through this entire album and it's just so negative. So, but I don't care that much about lyrics, so musically it's good, so I was able to listen to it. And then we get to their final album, Clockwork Angels, which, it's hard. Is it an F or a D? I don't know, guys. What do you think? Oh, gee. You know what? I'm putting it in an F. Unfortunately, Rush's last album to me is an F. If I put their first album at an F, it was because there was like 1 or 2 redeemable songs and everything else just sounded like a ripoff or derivative of something else going on. For this album, again, there's like 2 good songs on the entire album. They're trying to do a concept record. I don't understand the whole Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Orange. I don't understand the concept. The music is so, the distortion is so thick on all the songs that it just sounds like a sea of noise for the entire album. By this point, when this album was released, Geddy Lee's vocals were so shot in 2012. Geddy Lee's vocals were so shot. He just sounds like ass on all these songs. I think Carney's might be my favorite song, and then Caravan. But, even then, you know how I said on Vapor Trails you have to listen to every song like 5 or 6 times? I've had to listen to this song. Being a Rush fan, I've forced myself to listen to this album, like at least 20 or 30 times, and I still can't look at these title tracks and tell you what any particular song sounds like. And for Rush, that's sad, because they are supposed to be a band where you can their songs stick out. There is nothing that is lackluster about anything they do. And with this album, just a bunch of lackluster, underdeveloped songs. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, it's just weird now that I look at my tier how their first album that they put out and their last album were 2 of their worst albums. How does a band come full circle that crazy? And their best period was their absolute middle period. So it's like this triangle of weirdness. So anyway, this video looks like it's coming in at close to 45 minutes. That's my rankings of my favorite Rush albums and my grades for them. What do you think about my tier? I mean, I know there's some controversial choices in here. Honestly, if I really was being honest, as I'm taking a final review of this, I'm going to put 2112 in the C tier because I really don't like the album that much except for the B-side or the side 2 of it. So yeah, that's my list, guys. What do you think? Do you agree with this list? I guarantee if you're a Rush fan, you do not agree with this list. It's very controversial. Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what other bands you'd like me to do a tier ranking on. Until next time, talk to y'all later.